Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
Hey, welcome to the Great Man Within podcast. Every episode designed to help you to discover and live the great man within you. What does a great man need to know about sexual confidence? Sexual confidence means being okay with your sexuality, knowing how to ask for what you want in bed, being able to control your sexual impulses, and then understanding the nuances of your partner's pleasure and how they experience sex. So our guide for today's discussion is Ryan Thomas. And Ryan is a relationship and sex coach for men specifically that Brian first met when he was running his sexual health company. Ryan is someone who we also have interacted with multiple times in this online Facebook group called The Kaleidoscope, which you've heard us reference in previous episodes. The Kaleidoscope is this really powerful sex-positive forum online that is very well run, where you can go to get your questions asked and answered in a judgment-free arena. And Ryan's been really useful in contributing to some of the questions that we have posed in there that we've actually spoken about on this show before, so that's why we wanted to bring him on. Now, Ryan helps guys have epic sex by breaking through the emotional BS that fucks up your relationships and sex life. He runs theintimatelifestyle.com. And I would encourage you to go check out theintimatelifestyle.com because he's got a lot of really good articles that are short, quick on how to last longer in bed, how to understand your partner's sexual desires, how to bring out the dark side in bed, and also how to reduce sexual shame. And I think he's a really talented writer. He gets to the point and there's some really actionable takeaways. So go check out theintimatelifestyle.com, and I'm also linking that in the show notes. So a little bit of Ryan's backstory is that he joined the Army at the age of 17 and served for 11 years. That's where his intimate relationships really started to suffer. And so he got himself lost in the pickup artist world where a lot of hurting guys go to. And he just found a series of dead ends while he was in that environment. He realized there had to be a better way. So Ryan eventually decided to spend the next several years tearing down the artificial layers of his personality, where he started to explore his sexuality, his mind, and his heart. And he started to deepen relationships with women, and he started to have an elevated, intimate love life. And as he went on that path, he realized there are other men who were hurting, who needed to start to use some of the tools and shift some of this shame that they've been experiencing that blocked intimacy and powerful sexual connection in their lives. So in this episode, you can hear us talk about the concept of sexual performance and how that actually ruins a lot of your performance, why it's important to integrate the dark sides of your sexual desires so that you can avoid shame and elevate your arousal and also your partners as well. Why, when guys race to a sexual release, that depletes your energy and disconnects you from your partner. Why obstacles to fulfilling your sexual desires actually end up amplifying that very desire, and why that can be good sometimes and how that can be problematic. And why shame around your sexual desires. You know, like some of those things that you fantasize about that you don't want anyone else to know about. Well, why that is keeping you from your fullest sense of sexual confidence. And we have a deep discussion about that. And we also include one book on sexuality that you need to read. So enjoy today's conversation with Ryan Thomas, The Sources of Sexual Confidence. How do you describe sexual confidence to the people, like to the men that you are talking to, right? When they come to you and they're like, what is sexual confidence? Is there like an overarching statement or like a belief system or philosophy that they need to understand?
Yeah, there's a lot to it. So it's basically just being okay with your sexuality and being able to voice your sexual desires. If you can't have a conversation in your relationship about what turns you on and what you like and what you don't like, you haven't fully integrated your sexuality. And by fully integrate, I mean that there's no emotional charge when you say something about your sex life. So that's one aspect. the aspect of being able to ask for what it is that you want, owning your sexual power and being able to know what turns you on, why it turns you on, and feel in control of your sexuality and in control of your sexual impulses. There's a sense of power that comes from that. That is some sexual confidence. Sexual confidence also comes down to understanding your partner's pleasure and understanding women and how they experience sex, and understanding that you can provide and help them have an incredible experience as well. When you can have a lot of women that say, you know what, you're unlike other guys because of this, 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 and this. I mean, that's an external source of confidence, but we'll throw that into the pile, right, of tools that can make you feel more confident. But the only way to get those women to say that really does come down to understanding your own sexuality and understanding what turns you on. So I would say that is sexual confidence, owning your sexuality and your sexual pleasure.
Where does performance mix into this? When I think about sexual confidence, I often think about performance and how am I doing? Am I winning? Am I pleasuring her? Right. And so how does this idea of performance related to sex and confidence play together?
So imagine you're playing a sport and you lose every single game.
So I'm a Knicks fan and a Jets fan, so I'm quite familiar with that concept.
So you know that. Imagine you always get picked last for sports. Like, it's going to have an impact on your confidence, right? So if sex is different, okay, but we take, like, as guys, we want to overcome a challenge. We want to win. We want to be strong. We want to succeed. So giving a woman an orgasm is a challenge. There's a thing that we need to do. I get this, then that means I've done well. That means I'm good. So that means that sex is good. So that means I'm powerful as a man. So what we end up doing is we take sex and we turn it into this performance-based experience that I need to do something to her, get a result, and then I'm validated as a man. I'm valuable as a man. My sex is valuable. I'm okay. I'm good. If I don't get that thing, then I suck. She doesn't love me. She's going to think I'm a loser. She's going to tell her friends. Then all of her friends are going to know. And then all women are going to know, especially the ones that I'm attracted to. Then I'm going to lose her. She's going to break up with me. And then I'm never going to be able to date anyone because no one's going to want to have sex with me. And then I'm going to die alone. Oh my God.
This is so good. It's like you've been in my head for the last 30 years or so. And like this narrative has played out. So thank you for bringing that to light. So how do we get over that? How do we not play in that world anymore?
Yeah, so it's about recognizing that sex isn't about performance. You're not doing sex to her. You're having sex with her. So it's about being a sexual being, not a sexual doing. So exploring and appreciating and enjoying pleasure together. That's what sex is about. It's exploring and experiencing sex together rather than searching for the outcome.
So for someone who's maybe never really heard of that concept before, right? Like it's not something you're doing to someone, it's something that you're having with your partner, and someone who maybe is like, okay, I get the concept, then how do I bring that, like a new way of being, into my relationship with my partner? Is that a conversation I need to have? Is there a technique I need to employ? What's kind of the first step for a guy who wants to bring this now to his partnership or into the bedroom if he's not in partnership?
Yeah. So as guys, we can look at sex very linearly. I kiss the woman, then I get erect, then I get naked. We have foreplay, which leads to sex, which leads to orgasm, which leads to being done. No more tension. The horniness is now gone.
Yep.
That's the way that guys function. We want to get rid of that tension. We want to experience orgasm and get rid of the tension. And it's very linear. So women, on the other hand, experience sex more cyclical. Kissing can lead to foreplay, which can lead to more kissing, which can lead to penetrative sex, which can lead to foreplay. They can experience an orgasm and then penetrative sex, another orgasm, then more kissing and cuddling, and then more sex and another orgasm. It's just very cyclical. And orgasm doesn't mean the end. They like to stay in that state. So women enjoy the experience of sex, the tension and the energy that's surrounding that experience. That's what they really enjoy. So as guys, if what we're doing is we're trying to get somewhere and trying to perform and try to do something, I'm going from point A to point B, I accomplish it, done, that removes the energy from the experience. So whether you're having sex with a partner, it's not about doing any particular technique. It's just about prolonging the experience, feeling different types of pleasure together, removing orgasm from the conversation, and just allowing yourself to stay in the experience for longer.
Yeah. To that point, Ryan, Brian, you and I have talked about that, where there was this point in time, maybe in both of our sex lives, where we finally heard of this concept of like sex without the orgasm. Because it was like kind of mind blowing. So what else would you do? Because as young men, or when I discovered masturbation at the age of like 12 or 13, it was very linear. It was like, I feel this thing, I want it out. And then I go and I make that happen. And I was successful every single time, like at least in my terms of success. Yeah. And I put a lot of reps in. If you've ever listened to this show before, I've talked about how many reps I put in when I was in my teenage years and early 20s. And to your earlier point, Ryan, it was all very much like one way. It was like the only way that I learned. And then I started experimenting with other ways. And I was like, oh, there's actually other parts of me that I haven't stimulated, or other things that I could use that could help me practice for when I'm with a partner. I think it was maybe in my early 30s where I first started this concept of withholding ejaculation. And so I would be with a partner where like some of these lovemaking sessions would be intimate. They would be cyclical, to use your term. They would be long, and the energy would continue, and we'd finish like, in 60 minutes or something like that. And I would still have that energy in me. And then we could go back at it 20 minutes later or later that night. And it was fascinating what was possible when I wasn't racing from point A to point B. And I love how you outlined, it was kind of like kiss, erection, clothes come off, penetration, done. And then it's like, leave me alone. I lived that for a fair amount of time. And I feel a greater sense of freedom and definitely deepened intimacy connection as a result of breaking from that linear, rigid pattern.
And you probably feel much more confident in your sexual experience as well.
You know what? I absolutely do. Because, for me, part of the confidence came from watching how my partner would respond to like me showing up differently.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like just being aware of the cyclical nature of how she responds. And she felt like so met, so seen. And what ended up happening in those situations was it actually seemed to intensify. I'm thinking of like one partner in particular. It seemed to intensify her desire for me to orgasm, because she wanted to please me back. And like in her mind, like pleasing me back was me, like coming. When I explained to her, actually, this is more about like staying in the moment with you, it kind of blew her mind. And she was just like, oh my God, I've never heard of a guy who's wanted to do this before. And I'm like, yeah, I read about it in a book, but I'm going to make you believe
and
that
now I'm testing it for the first time. How's it going?
Yeah. And so that like my confidence went through the roof, because like I could see the joy on her. I could feel more present in the moment, and we wanted to please each other. So yeah, of course, confidence went through.
Dude, what's coming up for me right now is that it's really hard to not appreciate an orgasm. Right? Like an orgasm is like maybe the most intense feeling that we can have in life. It's really hard to not be like, yes, that was amazing, and now I'm done and move on. But what I hear you talking about in terms of cyclical or prolonging or staying in the experience is really an appreciation of different things along that spectrum. So you can start to appreciate the back and forth. You can start to appreciate the feeling and the touch, Ryan. I know you talked about that in the very beginning of practices that we could include, like the erotic massage. Now, back in the day, the erotic massage for me was just a means to an end. I couldn't appreciate the actual giving of a massage because all I was looking for was the one thing that I appreciated, which was the orgasm. So like for me, that's at least what I go to, is I can actually appreciate the breath work. I can appreciate the smell. I can appreciate the connection. I can appreciate that meditative state that you can get into. And also, I still appreciate the orgasm.
Yeah, exactly. It's about appreciating all these elements.
All the elements.
Everything that's there, not just the orgasm. It's not about hating on the orgasm. It's about saying, hey, this is fun.
There's so much more. There's so much more. We've referenced this a bunch of different times, but the book by Montauk Chia, The Multi-Orgasmic Man.
Yeah.
And I just heard about, I think it's the first of its kind. I just heard about a tool. Like we're guys, we love our tools. And there's a personal pleasure device, but it's more like a train. I look at it as more like a at-home workout thing, but it's called My Hixel. And it's this thing that trains you through gamification, not porn, but gamification of how do you last longer, not from a performance standpoint, but so that you can stay in these moments that we're talking about a little bit longer. And that's not something I've tried yet, but I found that was interesting that there's even a market for that.
Of course.
There's a market for everything, man. There's a problem. There's a market. Yeah, send that over. I'd be interested in seeing that. I think a lot of guys, they wonder like, what's the point? Like, I just love coming. I just love coming.
Yeah.
And when you can experience a non-ejaculatory orgasm and experience the pleasure, but without the ejaculation, it's like, okay, I get it. I will admit, like coming, it's great. So there can be discipline required to not come.
Yep.
Once you go through that and build that muscle, it gets so much fucking better.
Dude, and it is a muscle, because I've had experiences in my life where that was the norm for me, where I wouldn't ejaculate. And then I got into a relationship where that wasn't the norm, and getting back to that, it feels like there's this dance and a flow between the two very much.
Yeah. Big time.
Ryan, one of the things that you talked about in the text message you sent to us in advance is this power of integrating the light and dark of our sexual desires. And I know that last year in the workshop that I did, it was a 9-month workshop with John Wineland, who is a fantastic teacher around like sexual intimacy and magnetism. And he's also a student of David Dada's. We did a lot of work around this arena of dark sexual energy. And I also read a lot about that in the one of the best books I've read on sexuality called The Erotic Mind by Dr. Jack Morin. And like my understanding of this concept of like our shadow side, this dark side of ourselves that we typically hide because it's not socially acceptable, right? Like these fantasies, these dark desires that we have that we oftentimes may find ourselves fantasizing about, that bring shame into our lives, and we don't tell anyone about them, or maybe we don't express them, but we'll watch it on porn, or we'll go and hire someone to bring that experience to us. Maybe we'll even cheat as a result to get that. And what Carl Jung, the psychologist, talks about is like we can never be a fully integrated human being until we embrace the part of ourselves, like that dark desire that is a part of ourselves, and not suppress it. So I know that a big part of your work is helping men to touch base with that part of themselves that is dark. And I know you have I think you have an article on your website that says something like about become a good guy by being bad or something along those lines. What is your perspective on the dark side, and how are you helping men to connect with that part of themselves?
Dude, I am so excited right now. Like
energetically or sexually?
Oh yeah.
That's an all of the above face for the record.
That is an all of the above face. I've got so many thoughts running through my head right now. When you asked before about sexual confidence, understanding and being able to integrate our dark side is 50% of the picture. It's not just the stuff that you're turned on by. It's also by looking at the stuff that you feel shameful for. I do so much work with my clients around sexual shame, and sexual shame is basically the dark side of our sexuality. I've had clients who enjoyed causing pain. They didn't want to do it to someone who didn't want it because they're a good person, and they don't want to cause, terror in someone. They want someone who appreciates that and also gets pleasure out of it. But there's so much shame around it. As you've mentioned this about the dark side, I've actually started a series of episodes on my podcast called The Secret Sexual Share. And I've been interviewing men. They're coming on the show. I'm doing it completely anonymously. I'm distorting their voice so you can't even hear what their voice sounds like. It's like an FBI thing. And they're sharing these aspects of their sexuality that they felt a lot of shame around. Some guys have shared about enjoying fisting. A really masculine identified guy who likes being pegged, which basically means his girlfriend puts on a strap on and then fucks him in the ass. And there's so much shame around that. Premature ejaculation, erectile dysfunction, abuse. So there are all these things that these guys are coming onto the show to share. Now, sexual confidence really comes down to, again, being able to integrate our sexuality, the things that we like and the things that we feel shameful for, maybe the darker stuff. The process of integrating means first being able to say something out loud. So it's like, I'm denying, I like watching gay porn. I try to reject it. Like, no, I shouldn't like that. Does that mean I'm gay? I don't want to look at it. So instead it's like, but then you get sucked into porn and you end up watching gay porn because the desire keeps coming up and you can't force it away anymore. So instead you just look at it, you say, okay, you know what? I like watching gay porn. And you can say it out loud to yourself, by yourself in a private setting, out loud, I like watching gay porn. And you turn towards it. And then you can say it to someone who's safe. Maybe it's a coach or a therapist or a counselor. You say it out loud. Then you can say it to a close confidant. Then you can say it to a close group of people in a safe environment. Maybe it's group therapy or a tight group of close friends. And then you can go through the process of saying it out loud more and more and more. And this is the process of integrating it. So you can't integrate these parts of ourselves, of our sexuality that we dislike, if we try to reject them and push them away. So the only real way to remove the shame is to actually turn towards it and look at it full on with intention and bring it in front of you and embrace it. And that's the only real way to remove the shame and generate deep sexual confidence.
Let me talk about a personal experience from my life. Like when I was much younger, most of my sexual connection started online. Like when I was 16 years old, this was back in the AOL days because I'm 41 years old right now. And I was a virgin until I was 20. But I was speaking sexually to women online, from 16 until 20, until I had lost my virginity. And most of those women were much older than me. And I'm talking about when I was 21 or 22, I slept with a 47-year-old woman that I met online and multiple 40-year-old women when I was in my 20s. And that felt really good for me. But I was deeply ashamed of that. I didn't let a single person in my life, not one person in my life knew about that at all, because I'm like, I must be a freak. I must be a weirdo. It was actually before the whole trend started with Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher, where the older woman and the younger man validated it in our sort. I'm serious. It was before that happened.
You're ahead of your time, Dominic.
I was kind of a visionary. Let's just call it what it was. But at the time, I felt like a freak. I literally did. And it was only through in my 30s, I think it was probably when I went through Sex Addicts Anonymous, where I started to embrace that. And I understood why I liked some of the older woman energy. And I think it's one of the most downloaded categories in porn. MILF porn is one of the most downloaded categories. So it seems like there's a lot of that also for other men. But this category of shame, Esther Perel, who's one of the foremost leaders around intimacy and sexuality, I think she said that the number one issue facing men in healthy sexuality is shame.
Yes.
And I think almost every one of us carries something around that. And Brian, what's yours?
Yeah, sure. Let me just break that out really quick. Well, I have a question on this because, Dominic, something you and I have talked a lot about is back in those days, there was a public Dominic and a private Dominic. And that private Dominic had a lot of shame attached to him, right? And so a lot of what we've been going through Sex Addicts Anonymous, even this podcast, is about exercising some of that and getting it out. And like Ryan described, being able to turn in the mirror and say, this is something that I enjoy. Being able to turn to a therapist and saying, this is something I enjoy. Turn to a friend and say the same thing. But there's a difference between something that we want to keep private and something that we feel shame about.
Sure.
And Ryan, when you were talking to me about, or when you were mentioning, go talk to all these people about your kink, about your thing, about the thing that you have a heaviness around or charge around, how do we distinguish? Going to tell my friends that I like gay porn, for example, doesn't seem like something that would be helpful necessarily. And so I'm curious, have you experienced that or resistance from guys doing that? Or are there other ways other than just telling the whole world that this is what I'm into?
Yeah. So it really comes down to just personal awareness. How do you feel about it? Do you still get excited mixed with a lot of shame and just feeling and do you have a lot of thoughts of oh, you're stupid, they're going to think you're an idiot, you suck, you shouldn't be doing this, and then feeling down and just wanting to retract and crawl under a rock or just run away? If you still have those feelings when talking about something that you like sexually, then there's still a lot of shame. That is a source of shame. If, however, you decide, I don't want to share about watching gay porn to someone at work because, hey, there's an impact, well, I'm just going to be private. I don't need to say this. There is a social impact. I don't want to tell my parents yet that I'm gay. I'm going to tell them eventually, but I'm trying to navigate what that conversation is going to look like because they're very devout Christian. And I'm concerned about how the relationship is going to change. You may have come out fully on your own, but understand that there's a dynamic shift. So that's how you can understand personal awareness of what's the charge that's coming up and looking at that. Am I running away because I'm ashamed of it? Or am I just aware of what the social impact will be when I say it out loud? And I'm choosing to be private to avoid that because it's not necessary.
One of the equations in the book, The Erotic Mind, is, and I believe I have this correct, desire plus obstacles equals excitement.
That's it. Yeah.
Right? Desires plus obstacles equals excitement. And so this desire in my case which was these older women, obstacles was, physical distance, but also societally not accepted in my social circles, not accepted. And what that equation tells you is it's almost like shame or obstacles can heighten the desire, right? That's what creates the excitement. And then this pattern can continue, this cycle can continue where the thing that you're ashamed about, you become increasingly drawn to. And I saw this front row center in the 4 years I spent in Sex Addicts Anonymous, where many of these men were were demonstrating behaviors that they wished they could stop. They wished they could stop. They didn't know how to because this shame cycle perpetuated itself. And I imagine so many of our listeners don't have anything that extreme. Some of them maybe do, and you're connecting to this. But like even on a smaller scale, that shame cycle can continue. And what I think I heard you say, Ryan, is even if like you just own the desire and you don't put a label around it, and you just say it out loud to yourself, it's like, I like this for whatever reason. It actually like reduces its grip. Like one of those obstacles has now been removed. And I found for myself personally that like once some of those like judgments that I placed on it, the shame that I placed on myself, once those started to dissolve, the grip that desire had over me also dissolved with it. And now I had a choice versus being commanded by that sexual impulse.
Yes, exactly.
These are some deep conversations that we're having, and we're talking about the quality of our awareness and is it shame versus is it private and everything else. And you've given us some really great tools. I'm curious, where do you see guys starting with you? So you're sex and intimacy coach. You're helping guys work through these things. Some guys are just coming to you. And I'm curious, like, what is it that brings guys to you and your type of work?
Yeah. Most of the guys, it's around sexual shame. Like they're not happy with where they are in their sex life. They're not happy with their dating life. Not in the sense of like, hey, how can I go meet women? So one client, he said, you know what? I just don't want to even try talking to women because I just expect that there's just going to be pain and there's going to be so much work around having sex and sex isn't going to be very good. So I'm just avoiding it. But I don't like that. I want to be able to have a good relationship. I want to be able to have a great sex life. So that's an example of a client. I've had clients who have struggled with ED, not feeling masculine enough. I had one client who had mentioned, this was about 7 months ago, and he had said that his girlfriend didn't find him masculine enough. So he came to me to work on that. So that's where a lot of men come to me, is because they're not happy with their sex life and they're not happy with their relationship to women, and they're dealing with a lot of shame around their sexuality, and they just want to be better men. So that's what I do. So what I do is I help men have epic sex and break through the emotional BS that fucks up their relationships and their sex lives. So that's what I do. Yeah. So when that hits home for a guy, he can reach out to me, and then we just go through a process of discovering what working with me would look like.
That's great. Where can they find you? Where's the easiest spot to find you?
theintimatelyfestyle.com, or you can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Ryan Thomas TIL. That's for The Intimate Lifestyle.
Yeah, I know, Ryan, you put out a lot of, and Dominic and I looked a lot through this, and I often like seeing your posts on Facebook because they're really well thought out, and it often sparks ideas in me. And have I considered this? Have I thought about this in my life? And so I really appreciate that content that you're putting out. It's really great stuff.
Ditto.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And I'm curious, we're coming towards the end of this podcast here, and we didn't get into the real details of how you, Ryan Thomas, went from military pickup artist, some anger and shame around women, to where you are now. And while we don't have time for that entire story right now, I am curious, what feels most different to you now that you are on this path?
I love that question, because I've shared the story about going from Army to what I'm doing now so many times. Now I was actually about to just say, go to my website, take a look at the About page. Let's say in some juicy stuff that can help your listeners. But I like that question. Like, what feels different now than back then? I would say solidity in who I am. I am not scared of having sex. I am not worried about, am I going to perform? I actually enjoy my interactions with women. I enjoy the sexual experience. I enjoy the process. I can sit around at home alone and not feel shame, not feel like shit.
Wow.
And that's for a lot of guys. They'll just sit around, they'll be doing nothing, and they'll feel like shit. So they'll go and drink or do drugs or try to go and pick up. I can sit alone at home and do nothing and be happy.
Wow.
And that is not something that I could have done before. So those are some big changes.
Dude, that sounds like freedom. It sounds like having a lot of freedom and just being who you are. That's beautiful.
Ultimately, it's sexual and emotional freedom. That's what I have, and that's what I create for men.
Hey, did you get something of value out of this podcast? If so, I'm going to ask you a favor. would you be so amazing as to go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a review? Your ratings and reviews can show someone who's just discovered our podcast for the first time that we are worth listening to. And that way we can reach a wider audience. So please head over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review. You rock.